Welcome to Flunking the Written, a fully spoiled Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans break down every episode of the show. Join Kimberly and Megan every Tuesday as they overanalyze each scene and discuss the Buffyverse at large. Now let's meet up with the Scoobies and get into this week's episode of Flunking the Written.
What can I say? I flunked the written.
I actually am aware that I have grown a lot as a person and in my knowledge of the world and the people around me in the last few years, because for the very first time watching this episode, I saw all the microaggressions, and there's a lot of them. I was actually watching through it thinking, how did they let all of this get put in here?
Yeah, it's rough. What's My Line the Second? Written by Marty Noxon, directed by David Semmel. Buffy joins forces with a mysterious slayer named Kendra in hopes of saving Angel from Spike and Drusilla and the deadly ritual they have planned.
Well, now that just gives it away if you haven't seen the episode or know the story. Because, if the very first time you watch this, you're probably thinking, oh, she's crazy, or, under a spell or something. But now you've seen the description and you're like, oh, she is a slayer.
She is a mysterious slayer in fact. So we start off exactly where we left at the end of last episode, and Buffy and Kendra are there still in their fighting poses, and Buffy explains that, that's a nice cover story and all, but you should try it on someone who's not the actual slayer.
And then Kendra doubles down on, I am the slayer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Then Buffy decides they're both going to back off and not fight, and they'll go to her watcher and figure out what's happening. Which I actually think Buffy accepts that she's another slayer pretty fast for someone who's been told there's only one for, several years now.
Yeah. Well, and there's also the layer of the Order of Taraka and how that might be a weird strategy to get her to, let her guard down. I mean, there's a lot going on in Buffy's life right now.
Yeah. And it with all that going on, though, and basically the slayer lore, it's really odd how fast Buffy's like, oh, you're a slayer? Let's go talk to my watcher.
Yeah.
I would think it would take more convincing than that. Kendra asks what she means by not getting wiggy, not fighting, and Buffy says, no Kiko, no Fido, which I find very inappropriate. Although, and I noticed watching this episode, there's several of these moments where it's kind of like, really, did you have to add that? That really got through the writers.
Oh yeah.
Because Kendra has a accent, very strong Jamaican accent. Well, we talked about that at the end of the last podcast. But she says no Kiko, no Fido.
Yeah.
Which isn't really. Yeah, that's inappropriate.
Yeah, Buffy's not painting in the best light in this episode for sure.
Oh, she's really not.
It's real bad. And there's a couple of instances like this throughout the series. My personal favorite is from season 7 when she just kind of assumes that Robin Wood is from the hood and he immediately corrects her and says Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
That's my personal favorite. But yeah, there's going to be more unfortunate things to discuss as this episode progresses, but Kendra explains that she was sent here to do her duty to kill vampires, and then we immediately cut to Angel, who is hiding in the dark corner of the cage trying to escape the sunlight that's slowly creeping in. And we go to credits.
Yeah, and when we come back, Kendra and Buffy are talking to Giles, and right away we see that Kendra is very, very different than Buffy in the way she relates to her watcher, because she is very, very respectful. I don't really like what the script says.
Oh.
The script says subservient, almost in a slave master sort of way.
Oh.
Which I find very inappropriate. Even worse than the other, considering the races of the people involved, and actually just in any context.
Oh yeah,
but that makes it worse, and I'm very glad that did not get into the episode.
Oh God. So, stepping away from the casual racism, can we talk about how terrible the Watchers Council is at communicating. I
Right?
mean,
Like, how does Giles not know that there's another Watcher?
I mean, yeah, like he talks about Sam Zabuto and being a respected Watcher, and like that they actually like know each other or are aware of each other. There's clearly stuff in place and communications happening, but how are these people not being informed that there's two Slayers?
Right. The Watchers, like regular Watchers out in the field, I guess, don't know that. And we know that the Watchers Council knows that Buffy's still alive. Because Giles, we find out in season 3, Giles is still in communication with them and has been getting paid this whole time.
Yeah.
So, like, why wouldn't they tell him, hey, you know, she actually did die and another Slayer was called and it's this person and this is her Watcher and maybe y'all could, you know, help each other sometime.
And I think, I mean, it happens with Faith as well. Like, Faith just shows up and it's just like, hey, you know, you're Buffy, I'm the other Vampire Slayer. Like, why doesn't Giles get communications on these kind of things?
Right. And, like, when Faith shows up, the Watcher that follows her is, like, evil. And nobody's told Giles.
They just really have a problem with Giles, apparently.
I guess, well, Kendra didn't know about Buffy.
Yeah, it's weird. Like,
And wait, and here's the thing. You would think in all Kendra's studies, because in this episode she talks a lot about her studies and everything she knows and stuff. Wouldn't she study past Slayers?
Yeah.
So she should know who Buffy is, like as the most recent Slayer. And she's going to Sunnydale and she should know this is where the last Slayer lived and died. You know, it's a lot of holes that all the characters in this episode, information they should already know.
Yeah.
Except if they knew all that information, the show wouldn't be near as good. Because there wouldn't be all the shock value.
Yeah. You gotta have that whole, you know, I'm Kendra the Vampire Slayer to be continued moment, right? I mean, if you don't have that, then it's not a good episode. Just ignore all the plot holes.
Yeah.
Anyway, Willow enters and Kendra immediately goes on the defensive and Giles is there to explain that Buffy has people who know about her secret identity.
Before we get to that, I want to talk about two things that happen in this scene.
All
when Willow first walks in, Kendra runs up to her and says, identify yourself. And Buffy tells her, back off, Pink Ranger, this is my friend. And Kendra says, friend. And Buffy says, you know, person you hang with, amigo. Okay, so the first thing here is that Buffy says, back off, Pink Ranger, which is really interesting because Buffy's stunt double in the show was actually the Pink Ranger in Mighty Morphin Power Ranger, which I think it's kind of funny how she says that.
That's cool.
Yeah. And second, this is the second instance of Buffy being rather racist when she says amigo, which is Spanish, not Jamaican. So, yeah, it's a Jamaican accent. So I assume she's supposed to be Jamaican.
Yes. My understanding from what I've read is that was, of course, a last-minute decision and a regrettable one, I think, by pretty much everybody involved. I don't think anybody thought after the fact that was a good idea. But it was a last-minute decision, and the coach that they brought in to teach her this specific accent claims that it's like from a very obscure region of Jamaica or something like that, and so it is like a different type of accent than what we would normally associate with
a dialect all on its
the
own.
The dialect's very specific. But Bianca Lawson herself has even admitted it just kind of sounds like a really poor imitation of your, you know, traditional Jamaican accent. Yeah, I think like everybody, cast, crew, everybody has kind of said that it was a regrettable decision that they made.
Although I can see where if she was not originally supposed to be Jamaican, a lot of these references and things in the script and the things that Buffy says that we're talking about wouldn't really be the microaggressions that they are if they had not changed her background at the last minute. And it's possible they, you know, changed her background and just did not think to change the script.
Well, and my thought is there's a couple of examples that really stand out as terrible. And then there's many examples that I think had you not already had the really terrible ones and then just the piles on top of that, you wouldn't even notice.
Yeah.
But because it was already egregious in other parts of the episode, you start to notice all the little things as well that were just overlooked, and it piles on pretty heavily in this episode.
So anyway, they explained to her that Buffy has friends, and Kendra is kind of shocked that Giles lets her have friends. So we learn that Kendra probably does not have any.
Yes.
And they explain to Willow who Kendra is. And it is at this point that they realize that Buffy actually died.
Yeah.
And a new Slayer was activated. Giles is trying to figure out what to do. And Buffy says, but it's a mistake. She isn't supposed to be here. She needs to go home. Which, not really the expected reaction, because it's not like Buffy has been really excited about being the Slayer and, like, doesn't want anyone else to be the Slayer, you know?
Yeah. She goes back and forth in this episode, because she has that conversation with Willow later that we'll get into. But, like, here she's very much, like, anti-Kendra.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is her first reaction we see, which is kind of not what you would expect, because she's just automatically like, yeah, go away, I'm the Slayer.
Yeah. I think we've seen this from Buffy before. In Welcome to the Hellmouth, you have this kind of battle between her instincts and her more internal long-term thinking, where in Welcome to the Hellmouth, she's all like, I'm not going to be the Slayer anymore, I'm not your girl. But the second Cordelia says that there's a dead guy in the locker, she goes and checks it out. And here's a similar situation where she's just like, I hate being the Slayer and having my whole future carved out for me. And then another Slayer appears and she's like, no, but I'm the Slayer, you know? So she heavily has an instinctual, like, tendency to favor her Slayer side. But when she gets the opportunity to think about it, she doesn't want to be the Slayer, which I think is what that conversation with Willow is later on.
They continue talking, and Buffy's kind of like, well, what was your plan to do here? Just attack people until you found a vampire?
Then why the hell did you attack me?
I thought you were a vampire.
Oh, a swing and a miss for the rookie.
I had good reason to think you were. Did I not see you kissing a vampire?
Buffy would never do that. Oh, except for that sometimes you do that. But only with Angel, right?
Yes, right.
I love that little conversation there. She's like, no, I had a reason. You were making out with one.
It's a pretty good reason. I mean,
yeah. Then they talk about Angel and explain that he's, good now. And Kendra says, yeah, but and then Buffy's like, wait, what did you do? And so the next scene is them.
Okay, before we continue, there's a couple of things I want to talk about this. I'm gonna make you backtrack now.
Okay.
First of all, I love Willow's little bit where she's just like, Buffy would never do that. Oh, except sometimes you do that. And then the line of, but only with Angel, and then I just wrote in my notes, give it time.
I thought that, and I thought, she's like, but only with Angel. And Buffy, right? And Buffy's like, yeah, right. And I'm like, uh-huh.
But Kendra reveals that she has read about Angelus here, which is going to be important later on in the episode. But I just wanted to mention that in her reading that she mentions several times, she talks about how she has specifically read about Angelus.
Yes. But she's read about him, but she doesn't know that he has a gypsy curse.
Yeah.
So she doesn't know everything about him.
There's some weird gaps in what she's read, apparently.
Yeah. But I'm perfectly fine with you making me backtrack, because the cool thing is that we notice different stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And the next scene is Angel in the cage in the bar again, and he's about to get burned to ash. The script actually says that he's moments away from total combustion. Then all of a sudden we see someone grab him and pull him out, and it's Willie the Snitch. He pulls Angel out and drops him down into the sewer, and Willie drops down after him, and there is Spike. Realize, oh no, Willie, you're giving Angel to Spike. And Spike gives Willie a bunch of money, and they kind of have a little combo where Spike threatens him not to tell anybody and all this stuff. And there's a really funny conversation here that I love. Willie says, what are you going to do with him anyway? And Spike says,
I'm thinking maybe dinner and a movie. I don't want to rush into anything. I've been hurt,
and that one makes me grin every time.
I put that in my notes as our first Spangel bait. But Yeah. Can we talk about how inconsistent sunlight is? Because Angel is super weak here. And I like this. I like this version of how sunlight works. But, like, later on in the series, Spike just casually walks around in sunlight. I mean, it just...
with just a blanket over his head.
Yeah. This is, like, just... He's not even really in direct sunlight. He's just... He can feel the heat off of the sunlight or something. And it's enough to weaken him. Enough to where Willie the Snitch can drag him out of the cage and into the sewer with no, actual words. No attempt to resist from Angel. There we go, found it.
The next scene is Cordelia and Xander at Buffy's house. And Cordelia is looking through the makeup box that Worm Guy has.
Yeah. I called him Worm Guy too. He has an actual name that I wrote down in my notes for the last episode, but I didn't look it up again for this time. So he's just Worm Guy every time.
He's literally called Worm Guy in the script.
I think it's like Norman something, according to the Buffy wiki page. But anyway,
Norman Fitzer.
Yeah, there we go. I do enjoy that Cordelia has to explain that she is both a winter and a summer. It's just very Cordelia to me. She suggests that maybe he should consider selling something else like dictionaries, and then she sees a worm
crawling out of his sleeve, which believe me, if I saw that on somebody, that would make me kind of do a double take and back up slowly too.
Yeah.
And Xander comes up, and Xander kind of steps behind him and is like, he's leaving. And Xander tries to get him to leave, and when he does, the worm guy's face starts to ripple, and a worm basically crawls across his cheek and into his ear. It's some very, very horrible CGI.
Yeah, it's still enough to make me go, ew, though.
But it's very bad.
It's very bad. But anyway, they run, as is the accurate reaction to that. And the back door is blocked because apparently the worms can travel super fast and make it to where he can practically teleport, which is a cool power that never comes up again.
Kind of strange because, like, whenever he is actually worms, that never happens in the show. They run down into the cellar and shut the door, which if he can teleport like that, I don't know why he doesn't just appear in the cellar with them.
Yeah.
They end up using duct tape to tape at the bottom of the door so the worms can't get in, which I actually think is pretty clever.
So here's my question. Do we count this as being trapped in the basement?
Isn't it chained in a basement?
I mean, locked in the basement was kind of the idea. So they're not really locked in the basement though, because they can exit at any time. He's just like outside
holding them there.
Yeah.
So they're trapped.
Yeah. So it just depends on our wording. Yeah, they're not locked away in a basement. My thought was either a door's locked or they're chained in the basement or in a cage or something like that when I initially worded it. This one. I think we can skip this one. This is very important discussion we're having.
Of course, we have to get our counters accurate.
Yes. Okay, so from there, it is Buffy and Kendra at Willie's, and Kendra immediately notices that there are no ashes, so she did not kill him. Which erases any issues that they had. Willie shows up, and Kendra immediately knocks him down, and Buffy says something. And this is one that I feel like the Jamaican accent really made this one sound terrible. But when she says, "Doesn't anyone just say hello where you come from?" It's just another one of those that, if there weren't so many egregious things in this episode, I think this one would have just flown by me and I wouldn't have paid attention to it. But this, coupled with everything else, I'm just like, oh, there's another one for the counter on.
Yeah, see, we can count that one as 3, but I actually would not have thought of that one, and I didn't think of that one, which just goes to show you don't always see them.
Yeah,
even when you're aware it's happening. Because I didn't even pick up on that one. Yeah.
Anyway, Kendra explains that this one is dirty. She can feel it, which is a weird skill that she has, but she's not wrong. And they interrogate Willie, and Willie says that Angel went underground. And they just accept that, and they return to Giles. And Willie is the worst and suggests that, maybe Buffy and Kendra should consider modeling, tasteful stuff. But, naked.
But tasteful, yeah.
Asking these two, presumably minors, we don't really know Kendra's age, but we know Buffy's a minor if they want to model naked. And I just put in my notes, why? Why was this included?
Yeah. Although Willie doesn't really strike me as the person who, cares if you're a minor.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, but it just feels like one of those things, like many things in this episode, that just didn't need to be in there.
Yeah, just it wasn't necessary.
Yep.
And then our next scene is in Drusilla and Spike's bedroom, and Drew is in bed looking incredibly weak and covered in bruises. And Spike enters, and she says she was dreaming that they were in Paris and he had a branding iron and there were worms in her baguette. Which is okay. Then Spike comes in with Angel. It says, "Your sire, my sweet." And they talk about how now they have Angel and they'll do the ceremony and she'll be fully restored. And he calls her his black goddess.
Yes. So then Drew asks Spike to let her have him, meaning Angel. And Spike is nervous at first and then laughs it off and says that she can play.
Which I think it's funny though, knowing their history, like having watched all through Buffy and Angel to all the flashbacks and stuff. Spike might have thought she meant something very different when she was like, "Can I have him?"
Oh yeah. I think even in this episode it's there enough. But yeah, and then Spike brings Angel to Drew and she calls him a very bad daddy and slaps him.
Yeah.
And I will say there's a lot about this episode that makes me uncomfortable. I am totally fine watching Drusilla torture Angel all day though. That doesn't make me uncomfortable at all. I will watch that for hours. I don't know what that says about me, but...
Then our next scene is Buffy and Kendra and Giles and Willow, and they're walking through the schoolyard, and Giles tells her he's talked to her watcher and that she's going to stay there and help with everything going on.
Yeah, so here's another thing that leads to the weirdness of it. So she's researched Angel. She knows about Angel, but she doesn't seem to know Spike and
Drusilla.
And it seems like a weird disconnect to me that of all of the vampires, Angel's the one that she would have researched, yet she wouldn't have researched his direct line, which includes a vampire that's killed 2 slayers. And you talk about anybody who would want to study stuff like that, it would be Kendra.
It's her knowledge is very much used to move the plot along.
Yeah.
And doesn't make sense otherwise.
Well, maybe she just read a blurb in one of her demon textbooks that was just like, Angelus was a bad guy, and she was just like, all right, I'll remember that.
Yeah, possibly. They talk about how much Kendra studies, and then Kendra mentions that there's a Slayer handbook, which we hear about this episode, and we never hear about it again, which I think it could have been really cool if they had continued with that.
I want somebody to create the Slayer handbook for me. I
would totally buy that. But yeah, there's a Slayer handbook. Buffy's like, I didn't get a handbook. What handbook? Giles says he was pretty sure the handbook wouldn't work in her case.
And apparently Merrick was as well, because clearly she didn't get one from her first watcher.
Yeah, she didn't get it from him. Then he turns back to Kendra and they start talking about deep into the book and the footnotes and all this stuff. And Giles tells Buffy, hey, go make an appearance at the career fair because Principal Snyder was looking for you. And Kendra makes some snide comments about Buffy being a student and possibly a cheerleader.
Which Kendra should be smart enough to figure out that Buffy's a student at that school, because they are constantly at that school.
Yeah.
But I also wrote that Giles finds some strange things amusing because he talks about Buffy quitting cheerleading was an amusing story. And I'm just like, no, Giles.
Not really.
She nearly died.
Yeah. And then there's kind of a moment when you feel a little bit bad for Buffy because you're like, you can tell from her face as Giles and Kendra move off talking about the books they've researched that she feels a little left out, even though she doesn't want to research those books.
Yeah.
Willow tells her she'll always be Giles's favorite. And they have a little conversation about, well, maybe I don't want to be. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if Kendra could take over. And she could, go to Disneyland and then do career day stuff.
Which I think is another sign of that. If she has the space to think and fantasize about these things, she will allow herself to do such, but
won't actually do it.
Yeah, like she would never. She just can't. She can't help herself whenever there's somebody who needs help or there's a threat that she feels, she's going to put herself in those situations again and again.
Yeah, and we see some of that in Helpless in season 3.
Yeah.
Which is such a frustrating episode.
But I mean, even at this point, like, Buffy should know that there's enough bad going on in the world that 2 Slayers isn't enough. I mean, there's plenty of work for both of them.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of work for, hundreds. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have all that happening, and then we cut back to Xander and Cordelia in the basement, which I keep calling it a basement. The script book keeps calling it a cellar, which I guess they're mostly the same thing. Xander and Cordelia are down there and they kind of start fighting because Xander wants to just wait there for Buffy to come find them, and Cordelia thinks he should be doing something. Even though she doesn't know what should be done, she thinks he should be doing something.
Also,
which is
good on, like, Giles for sending them there and then immediately forgetting about them.
That he sent them there, they've been gone for hours, yeah.
Thinking, maybe we should, here's Buffy, maybe we should check in on Xander and Cordy.
Because I sent Xander to her house when assassins are after her.
I'm sure it's fine. Maybe that was just Giles' strategy to finally eliminate Xander and Cordelia.
Oh, quite possibly.
He just wants to keep his favorites.
Yeah. Although I think it's funny when Cordelia says that, or Xander says that Buffy will save them, and Cordelia's like, how will she even know where to find us? And Xander very simply says, like he's talking to a small child, but this is her house. Odds are she'll find us. I love that part. So they really, really get into it and start yelling at each other and being stuck with each other and insulting each other. And then they both scream, I hate you, and fall into a very passionate kiss.
With the sweeping music. With the sweeping music. Oh.
It would not be as good without the music.
Oh, the music.
And in my notes here, I just have the word finally.
Finally, yeah.
Because there's been so many episodes where he, like, saves her and steps in front of her and they, like, hug each other and stuff,
Yeah.
So finally.
It is. And I think it's still, like, shocking enough that your first time through you'd be like, oh God, these two? But when you do a rewatch and look at all of the hints that lead up to this, you're like, oh yeah, those two.
Yeah, I see that. They were planning this for a while.
Oh yeah.
You can, if you're paying attention, you can see it. So they break apart and they're like, we have to get out of here. Mm-hmm. So they move the tape and take off, and they think he's gone and go running through the house. And then all of a sudden the worms fall out of the ceiling onto Cordelia, which I guess he was just waiting there for them.
I don't really understand his strategy other than gross factor, I guess. But they're not his target, so I guess I can forgive it. I don't know. The Order of Turok is really weird. And I feel like I complained about him enough in the last episode, so we can move on from that.
They run out, and Cordelia is covered in the little worms and starts screaming, help me. And Xander grabs a very conveniently placed water hose. Mm-hmm. And it starts just spraying her with it. In the script, it says it works, and he washes all the worms away, then helps her up, and they run to Cordelia's car and speed off. Okay, so in the episode, he basically just wets her down so he could look at her underwear.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly obvious that that's what he's doing, because she has to yell at him to stop.
It is.
And also, it does not work. Like, when they run to the car, she's still got worms all over her.
Oh, yeah. I don't know why she kept that sweater on and that wasn't immediately removed.
Yeah, I would have immediately taken that sweater off because, like, the majority, 90% of them were on the sweater.
Yeah, but just another awful, gross decision. I mean, I put it in the same category as that whole, you should consider modeling line. It's just like, just don't. Yeah. There's no purpose there. Doesn't do anything.
Yep.
So Buffy and Willow are at the career fair and kind of talking about Buffy's options, and apparently she could have been a landscape designer or something like that, but she missed that day, so instead she has to go to law enforcement, which is two options that seem very counter toward each other.
Yeah. So why are these the two options?
Yeah.
Law enforcement or
Landscaping.
Landscaping.
Yeah.
That's all we got here.
So Buffy notices Oz looking at Willow and says, hey, there's this guy checking you out. And Willow explains, oh, it's just computer nerd solidarity as Oz is approaching her.
Yep. Which is not accurate. He is not just expressing solidarity. He comes up. They had this little conversation, which is adorable. And I wrote in here that I just love Willow and Oz. But honestly, I love Willow and Tara too. And I think it's just, Willow is just adorable with anybody.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter who. Like, Willow and Satan. I'd be like, oh, they're so cute together. You know, it's just anybody. Willow and whoever. So yeah, they have a little conversation about the computer person selection process, and then they kind of smile at each other. Very cute. And then we go back to Buffy, who signs in at the law enforcement booth, and then there's a police lady there, and I say police lady because that's what it calls her in the script book.
Okay, I'll allow it.
Yeah, 'cause as soon as I said it, police lady, I was like, oh, no. But that's what it says. Okay. So I've noted it says police lady in the script. I'm going to go with police officer now.
Good.
The police officer says, okay, listen and answer when I call your name. And she says, Buffy Summers. And Buffy says, here. And she immediately draws out a gun and aims it at Buffy.
Yeah, no chill. No chill at all.
She just saw Buffy sign in. Like, she watched Buffy write Buffy Summers. So she knows. Like, why did she do the whole answer when I call your name, Buffy Summers? Like, what was that about? It's not like she had signed in 20 minutes ago and the police officer didn't see it.
I didn't even think of that. That's great.
Yeah. So there's basically a little mini shooting there in the school lounge, and Oz jumps in front of Willow to keep her from getting shot and get shot in the arm, kind of like a graze. And Buffy and the police officer assassin fight, and right when Buffy's about to get killed, Kendra comes up and starts fighting too and saves her. And then at one point during this little fight scene, it's not really important, but the police officer grabs a hostage and backs off with him, and then like kind of throws him at Buffy and runs off. And it's Jonathan. We all know it's Jonathan. We've seen him before and we know his name. I don't think it was meant to be him originally though, because in the script he's just called Hostage Kid.
Hostage Kid.
So like, I think
Formerly known as Jonathan.
Yes, Hostage Kid, formerly known as Jonathan.
I love the moment where she goes and checks on Oz.
Oh, yeah, I'm shot, you know. Wow, it's odd and painful.
In the library, Buffy's getting patched up after the encounter. They assume that it's one of the Order of Taraka, and Xander and Cordelia enter behind as they're discussing this and explain that, yeah, they were also attacked.
Yeah.
And nobody seems that concerned or...
Not really. They really don't seem that concerned. And then we see that Kendra is not capable of speaking to a guy at all. Because she kind of loses it when she has to talk to Xander.
Yeah, so, I mean, I read this completely as Kendra has a crush on Xander. Like, Kendra immediately is attracted to Xander, because that is the only guy that she's like that with. But she immediately shuts down around Xander. And I'm just like, Kendra, you could do better than that.
I didn't really see it like that. Because I guess it could be, but that is the only guy she's around except for vampires and a watcher. I mean...
Well, I mean,
who else is she gonna like? Willie
and
Spike?
Jonathan. I mean,
she didn't really speak to Jonathan.
There's moments, but yeah, she's been in a school full of boys, and this is the first situation where that's come up, where they're like, oh, well, she's weird around guys. But she is basically just like cannot sentence after Xander says, "Oh, so you're a Slayer. I like that in a woman," which I do enjoy that line.
Oh yeah, that's a good line.
And then Giles asks about the attacker as Cordelia finds a worm still on her and drops it and runs to the showers. And Xander explains that was what attacked them.
Yeah,
and
pretty much.
Here we have another reference to She-Mantis.
Yes, and that makes, let's see, I looked at it earlier just to make sure, and it's either 4 or 5. Check, it is 4.
Four references.
So far. We're only in season 2.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of references.
So Giles kind of explains that what he understands about the ritual is it'll be tonight and that they need Drusilla's sire. And this is when Buffy reveals that Angel is, in fact, that guy. She asks if the ritual will kill Angel, and Giles says yes. And
yeah.
Kendra is against helping him at first, but Buffy says that their goals mesh and that they should just work together on it, and Kendra says that she's with her. So I think this might be the first time that we see them kind of on the same page. Mm-hmm. And then Buffy has this amazing line.
Everything, the all the commentary and the Watcher's Guide. In the Watcher's Guide, it's like the quote of the week. And everyone loves this line, and I don't.
Spike is going down. You can attack me, you can send assassins after me, that's fine. But nobody messes with my boyfriend.
So why don't you like this line?
I don't. It feels insincere to me for some reason. I mean, I know she means it. Maybe I don't like how dramatic it is. But I've never really liked it that much, and I know it's one of everybody's favorite lines. Nobody messes with my boyfriend.
Yeah,
you know?
I love how teenage girl it is. I mean, that's the thing. It is
very teenage girl.
And that's every now and again we get to shine Buffy in this, like, stereotypical teenage girl light that we don't normally get to shine her in. And this is a list of priorities that is clearly in the wrong order. Buffy is faced with this later on in the series, of this idea of valuing your boyfriend over yourself is something that comes up in season 3 and then sort of again in season 7 when Dawn has that situation under the love spell. But this just seems like one of those, like, really kind of, it's set up to be dramatic and then the punchline hits and you're just like, oh, it's just Buffy being a, like, melodramatic teenager. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the melodramatic teenager part of it. But I think it's also is this the first time that Buffy specifically refers to him as her boyfriend?
No, I think she has before. I think at least once, but I couldn't guarantee it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe she referred to him as when she was talking about him being a cradle robber.
My cradle robber, creature of the night boyfriend. Yeah.
You know, at least she's aware.
Yeah.
All right, so then we cut to Drusilla torturing Angel. Just my favorite. But as she's getting the holy water out, you can hear her just very quietly singing the song that her mother used to sing that references back to Lie to Me. And it's just the creepiest thing. I love it. It's one of those little details that I just cherish so much. So in this whole encounter, she's talking about her mother, and as she's, like, pouring the holy water on Angel and talking about all of the foods that she used to eat and stuff like that, and then says
her little sister.
Yeah. And then says that, you know, they used to eat cake and eggs and honey until you came and ripped their throats out. Drew is, like, more upset about this than you would expect a vampire to be. Traditionally, when we see vampires and their relationship with their family before, it tends to be one of hate or desire to punish, or, you know, a lot of times you hear stories about vampires killing their family as one of their first acts. That's certainly what Angel did. And here you have, not only was that something that she didn't get the opportunity to do because Angel did it for her before she was even turned, but Drusilla's still, like, holding on to this. Drusilla's still angry at Angel for killing her family. And it shows a side of Drusilla that doesn't necessarily match with our typical soul canon of vampires at this point. And it is, I think, one of the more unique traits about Drusilla is that she is an empath. And I think part of her being an empath allows her to feel things more so than vampires normally would. And I would even go so far as to say that some of that might have carried over to Spike when she sired Spike, and that explains some of his empathic abilities as well. But it's just interesting to see, like, she seems like she's holding a grudge towards Angel here. But the interesting part is she's holding a grudge towards Ensouled Angel. When he loses his soul, she no longer has a grudge. So I think she delights in the fact that she knows that this is killing him. Like, he even has that moment of, like, if I could, and she cuts him off because she doesn't want to give him the opportunity to, like, talk about his remorse, because that's not fun. She just wants to sit the stage again and again and watch him suffer. And it's an interesting type of mental torment. So I don't know, like, if she's just a really amazing actress and is just doing this all as a show to torture Angel, or if she, like, genuinely misses her family.
She probably doesn't actually miss her family because she's a vampire. She can't.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, he made her insane before he made her a vampire.
Yes.
So she might remember all those feelings because, like, he killed everyone in her family before he killed her.
Yes. And it's
like,
also explained...
most of the vampire, like, lore and backstories, they became a vampire and then they killed their own family members.
Yes.
But that's not what happened. She watched them basically all get tortured and slaughtered before he came for her. So she might remember it.
Yeah. And it's also explained that she had abilities before she was a vampire. Like, she had the sight.
Make a difference.
So, I mean, it could be that some of those powers allow her to feel things differently. And that's what I kind of want to play with. And we'll talk about this more as Spike continues to kind of break the soul canon going forward. But I kind of like to play with the idea of not only is Drusilla herself capable of more emotions than a vampire should be, but also those that she sires are capable of emotion more than a vampire should be.
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
That is pretty awesome, and it makes sense. The only thing, this was really fun, a really fun scene to watch, and I enjoyed it just as much as you did. The only note that I have on it is at the beginning, Drusilla, when she's listing all the things that her family members like to eat, she says, "My mother ate lemons raw." And my only note was to question whether or not anyone actually cooks lemons.
I did today.
How did you cook a lemon?
I roast them in with my, like, fajita fixings. So I put them
lemon?
Yeah.
Well, like, we put lemon, like a little bit of lemon or lime juice on, like, fajitas and stuff, but not actually put a lemon. Okay. See, I thought it was really, really weird because I'm like, maybe I should look up during, like, the 17th century. Did people cook lemons back then and eat them? Because that's so weird.
Yeah, I don't know how common it is to do what I do.
Apparently not.
But, like, what I typically do, this is recipe time with Megan, is I get all my vegetables in the pan and get them all seasoned up, and then I sprinkle lemon juice on them. But I've cut up an entire lemon to sprinkle a little bit of lemon juice on it. So I just throw the lemon wedges in there and roast them with the vegetables. And then when they cook, they get a little charred and they get, like, real soft. And you can squeeze, like, the guts of the lemon onto your fajitas as you eat them, or just eat them that way. And they break down, and so they're easier to eat. So anyway, okay. I cook lemons. I don't know if anybody else does.
That, I guess it's possible then. I have never actually heard of it. So, okay. There's one little thing at the end, a very big foreshadowing moment where Drusilla says, "You think you don't have it in you now, but you do. I can feel it." Mm-hmm. And then she throws a bunch of holy water on his chest and then says, "I can almost taste it." And in my notes, I've got, "It's coming."
Yeah, like, I feel like we already understand that Drew totally knows that Angel's gonna lose his soul. I mean, it's already been foreshadowed before this moment, but yeah, Drew's just waiting. She's just like a giddy kid in the corner, just like, "Yay, when's it coming? When's it coming?"
Yeah. So the next scene, we're back at the library and they're researching, and Giles says there are 43 churches in Sunnydale. That seems a bit excessive. And And Willow says it's the extra evil vibe from the Hellmouth.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe in California, I don't know, a town that size in the South, I don't think that's excessive.
Yeah, in the South, there's a church on every other block.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a town that had a population of like 460, and we had like 5 churches. I mean, 43 churches in a town the size of Sunnydale is not a lot. At least for here. In California, it's possible it's a lot. I don't know. And then we have Kendra and Buffy in Giles's office, and they're basically talking about being the Slayer, and there's so many good things in here. They basically talk a lot about being the Slayer, and kind of Kendra mentions that she was taught that all the things in Buffy's life distract from being a Slayer. Mm-hmm. And Buffy is kind of like, no, they help me be a Slayer. My family and friends and my feelings are assets, and they help me be the Slayer. And during this conversation, Kendra mentions that her parents sent her to her watcher when she was very young, so young that she doesn't remember them. Which basically goes to show that in some cultures in this world, everyone knows about Slayers and Watchers and stuff, and they send their toddlers to be raised by a Watcher.
Yeah. That was the
Just
weird
on
thing
the
for me.
chance that they become a Slayer.
That was the weird thing for me, is like, she's very much like the idea of the Slayer has to work in secret and the secret identity. And then she talks about how serious her people take the calling, like everybody knows. And it's just, it's a super inconsistency for me. I do like that we have an early example of this situation where Kendra was identified as a potential Slayer and so was sent to a Watcher in the chance that she would be chosen. Yeah.
Makes season 7 make more sense.
Yeah, it certainly does. It's one of those things, though, that the more I think about this Watcher that she was sent to, the more I'm just like, ew. And there's lots of layers to this, so I'm gonna explain it bit by bit. But she explains that she has to be disconnected from everybody, right? No friends, no family. She's not permitted to talk to boys. Yet, she is dressed in what we eventually learn is her only shirt, in a low-cut, midriff exposing shirt. She is fully made up, and I'm just like, I don't want to say the words grooming, but I don't want to think about her Watcher too much.
Yeah, that didn't occur to me, but when you put all those details together, yeah, it does not look good, does it?
Oh, no.
Because she's basically completely isolated in the world with only her Watcher. And he does kind of have her dressed.
Yeah, not utilitarian.
Not like a soldier.
So yeah, Buffy's explaining that her emotions are her assets.
Yeah.
And
Kendra is basically like, no, it's a weakness. And Buffy says, oh, well, that explains it. And Kendra's like, what? And Buffy's like, well, this, and this, you're good, and technique and stuff, but I'd have beat you because you have no imagination. And Kendra's like, really, you think so? And she's like, Buffy kind of gets very condescending, and the power alone isn't enough. A great fighter does this and this, and I mean, you have potential. And Kendra gets mad and jumps up in Buffy's face.
I could wipe the floor with you right now.
That would be anger you're feeling.
What?
You feel it, right? How the anger gives you fire? Slayer needs that.
yeah, it worked well, and it continues to explore a little bit about Buffy's unique situation and the fact that she does get power from her emotions and from the people around her and the love she feels and stuff like that. And I mean, the fact is, she would have died at the hands of the Master had it not been for the friends that she had made. They were the ones that came down. It was Angel and Xander that came and found her, and Xander was the one to revive her. If she didn't have her friend, she wouldn't be alive right now. So Buffy understands how big of an asset having all of those people in her life are, and Kendra's been taught in a very different way. But in a lot of ways, Kendra is shown to be better than Buffy, right? Buffy even says her technique's better than hers. She's very good at fighting. She's very well studied. She's the quote-unquote perfect Slayer according to the Watchers Council. She is that groomed Slayer of, I'm gonna be good at all of the things that I'm supposed to be good at because that's what I was told to be good at. And Buffy is so different than that. And again, because of that, similar to the way that, Spike talked about a Slayer with family and friends, that wasn't, something he was prepared for. it makes her fighting style different. It makes her a perhaps more formidable opponent because she has more to live for. And you can see already Buffy understands how important all those things are in her life. Because if you think about the timeline at this point, Buffy was called and she kind of lost all those things, right? She lost all of her friends. And her parents divorced, so her family was in shambles and all of this stuff, and now she's kind of rebuilt that and understands that she's better having those things in her life than she was when she had to kind of abandon all of that before. So it's an interesting timeline to see Buffy come to this point and understand those are her strengths. And I like that they have, that the two Slayers really do feel different. You know?
Basically, with the versions of the Slayers in this show up until we get to like season 7, they're like different levels of extreme. Mm-hmm. Because we got Kendra, then Buffy, and then Faith. We get to see both extremes of what Buffy could be.
Yes.
Like the military, gung-ho, studies.
Yeah, the by-the-book Slayer.
And then the wild, not ever follow the rules Slayer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so at the end of the scene when Buffy and Kendra are talking to each other and Kendra admits that she's not permitted to speak with boys, Buffy says, unless you're pummeling them, right? Mm-hmm. And then remembers Willie and decides that Willie might have some information about where Angel is, where this ritual is. And Kendra says, you think he might help us? And then Buffy replies to her saying, I think we might make him. But when she does, she uses Kendra's accent. Mm-hmm. And it's very weird and very awkward.
Oh, God. It's the worst. Yeah. It's just
I don't like it at all.
And that's like the example, right? I mean, there's lots of examples in this, but that's like the example where you're just like, oh, Buffy, stop. Not cool. That's what I wrote in my notes. Not cool. So during all of this, there is a little bit of a quick clip of Xander discovering the way to defeat the Bugman is in its disassembled state, and Courtney calls Xander a dorkhead, which is just adorable.
Yeah. And in the script book during this scene, there's several descriptions of the way they're acting, and it's basically describing them as like 12-year-olds who have discovered they like each other. Like they're supposed to touch hands and then jerk away and like keep looking at each other out of the corner of their eyes and stuff like that, which doesn't really happen in the episode. But the next scene is back in Drusilla's bedroom, and she is still torturing Angel. Mm-hmm. And she tells him, say uncle. She says, oh, that's right. You killed my uncle. And it's just kind of, whoa.
Well, yeah. Like, Angel left no stone unturned. Like, everybody.
In her life, yeah. Then Spike comes in and he's like, okay, it's time, off to the church. And Angel starts making comments about Drusilla and Spike's sex life and how it's not as good as her sex life with him was. Mm-hmm. And knowing some of the history that comes out later, I can see where this like upsets Spike.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And he just continues goading Spike until Spike like grabs a stake and starts to stake him, and Drusilla's like, no. And they kind of talk. Spike talks about, hey, I can't kill you because then Drusilla's done and I need you to save her.
Yeah.
You know. And then they head to the church.
Yeah. And I will say, I enjoy the he can attack me, he can send assassins after me, but nobody messes with my boyfriend line. I enjoy that. But it does not even come close to how much I enjoy
Bad dog.
Drusilla's just awesome.
So then we cut to Buffy slamming Willie against the wall.
Mm-hmm. And her and Kendra are have very naturally fallen into this good cop, bad cop routine to get information out of Willie. And he kind of suspicious. I would be suspicious because very, very quickly he agrees to take them to the church where this is happening. And I'm like, yeah. Kendra wants to go back to Giles to get instructions, and Buffy's like, no, that's not really what I do. I just do my own thing. And they argue about that for a little bit, and then Buffy, you know, she's like, we have to go. We have to save Angel. He could die. And Kendra just says, he's a vampire. He should die.
Thank you.
What?
I love somebody being that blunt with Buffy on something like that. I mean, I appreciate that line so much. And she backpedals on it a little bit at the end of the episode, but not really. Other than saying he's pretty cute. It shows, again, this idea of Kendra looks at things as black and white. But when you think about this in the context of the series, and not as much with Angel, though certainly there could be an argument made for Angel, maybe should have died at certain points at the hands of Buffy sooner than he did. But especially when you look at Spike, and Chipped Spike specifically. How on earth did he live as long as he did? Why wasn't everybody just putting him down? But yeah, Buffy's philosophy when it comes to vampires is very different than Kendra's. Kendra's is very similar to Xander, right? Vampires bad is basically the thought process there. And there's some nuance to be had because the show plays with that, but fundamentally what we're taught through the show is that vampires are evil and there's no real in-between. Obviously, they bend the rules a lot, and we talked about that a little bit with Drusilla and Spike, and Angel's a very, very odd exception because he has a soul. But I love this point-blank direct line of vampires should die, and it's just a great line. It's not quite as good as Grr Bad Dog, but it's a good line.
Yeah. Grr Bad Dog. Buffy basically decides to go with Willie, and Kendra is like good riddance and goes to see Giles, Yep. So,
and then the other kind of weird thing about this is that she says that they can't do this on their own. But prior to that, it seems like
she did everything on her own.
She did everything on her own, and she had been groomed to do things on her own in that way, much as the Watchers Council would want her to. And so I understand we have to report to the Watcher because that's the procedure. That makes sense. But then the line of we can't do this alone seems not very Kendra to me. It seems like she would expect to go and report to the Watcher to get orders on what her next move was, but that her next move was to be a solo move.
This point, we have Willie leading Buffy out and takes her out into the darkness, and she follows him, and we see the worm guy, the police lady, and 2 vampires surrounding her. And Willie tells her, here you go, don't ever say your friend Willie didn't come through for you. And then looks at all the, bad guys and says, here you go, don't say your friend Willie didn't come through for you. Okay, so right here I have in my notes, like this issue right here that I have with this. Willie betrays Angel for Spike, betrays Buffy, and leads both of them into danger in this episode. Nothing ever happens to him. Angel doesn't do anything, which I find odd because thinking of Angel, the show Angel, if this had happened to Cordelia or Fred, he would have been threatened to within an inch of his life.
Oh yeah.
It's just a very different Angel than when he has his own show, because he just doesn't do anything. This guy betrays him and leads him to his death, and betrays Buffy and leads her to her death, and Angel's just okay, well, I'll talk to you next time I need to come to the bar,
Yeah. There's a lot of things about Willie that don't make sense, because why wouldn't they just try to shut down his establishment anyway? What's the good of having a vampire bar as the Slayer? And they visit it from time to time, especially in the later seasons, where they just go and casually hang out at the vampire bar. And I'm just you're the Slayer! This seems like a weird thing for you to be okay with.
Yeah.
But it is assumed that he is only serving pig's blood based on what he talked to Angel about previously. So maybe that's why.
Well, and when you think about the karaoke bar in the Angel show, well, he serves a lot of stuff that's not pig's blood. So, this does happen. Yeah. And then, in season 4, there's a vampire brothel, I guess, would be the only word for it.
Yeah.
Where it's
I know what you're talking
blood.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's blood instead of sex.
Yeah, but when Buffy finds that, it's mostly because of what's going on with Riley, but when Buffy finds that, she's burn it down.
Yeah, but that's for different reasons.
So back to the scene at hand. I know I said I wasn't going to complain about the Order of Taraka anymore, but I have to. When we were explaining about this group of assassins, they're all independent, right? And they're all hired with the specific task of killing Buffy. Yet in this scenario, not only are they just like casually hanging out as parts of Spike's crew, but their target is right there, and yet somehow Willie like convinces them not to kill her so that he can march her in to confront Spike. I mean, like,
that seems weird. You would think they would just kill her instead of taking her to Spike when that's what they were hired for.
You had one job. But anyway, they march her in, and Spike's upset because obviously he wanted her in the ground. That was the whole point.
Yeah. And he's trying to do this great big ceremony to bring Drusilla back to life with Angel and Drusilla, which involves him slamming a dagger through both their hands together. Yeah. Like their hands at the same time. Willie comes in, and Spike's like, "What'd you bring her here for?" You know. He's like, no, this is messed up. There's a line here that I really, it's very creepy and spooky.
Angel.
Yeah. It bugs me too, seeing them like that. Another 5 minutes, though, and Angel will be dead, so I forbear. Don't feel too bad for Angel, though. He's got something you don't have.
What's that?
5 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, creepy.
Yeah, it's a great line. It's one of those really like casual back and forths that I love that they do. But yeah, summons Patrice to kill Buffy, which I feel like Spike would want to do it, but you know, whatever. It's kind of his thing, but it doesn't really matter because Kendra flips in and knocks them all down like a bunch of pins at pool. What are they called? Is that what they're called?
Pins, bowling pins, yeah.
I said pool.
Oh, pool.
Yeah, we've been recording for nearly like an hour and a half at this point. I meant bowling pins. Yeah.
Well, you said knock them down. You don't really knock balls down in pool, so my brain just automatically went to bowling.
You figured it out. But anyway, yeah, and so everybody kind of just pairs off. Giles comes in and hits a vampire with a crossbow, and Giles and Willow take on a vamp, while Xander calls the worm guy out, and him and Cordy have laid a trap for him. Buffy's fighting Patrice, Spike's fighting Kendra, and everybody's got their little area, and everybody's playing a part in this, and I enjoy that.
Yeah, everybody's got their little assignment.
Yep.
Although it does seem kind of weird to me that in the space of time that Willie took Buffy through the sewers to this church, Kendra got back to the library, explained to everyone what was going on. They all made a plan. They all found the church, not knowing where it was, and got back to it. Like, pretty much within like a minute of Buffy getting there.
Maybe they had a long conversation out front while Spike was performing the ritual.
I'm just
whether
saying.
or not to walk Buffy inside.
I'm just saying. Very, very interesting how that timeline worked.
Yeah. So as everybody's fighting, Buffy turns to Kendra and says, "Switch." And so now Kendra's fighting Patrice, and Spike and Buffy are fighting, and you have this awesome exchange between Buffy and Spike. Oh, yeah,
definitely. I have always written by the notes here in this. But Spike goes, "I'd rather be fighting you anyway." And Buffy goes, "Mutual," which is, yeah.
So in their fighting, Buffy throws Spike across the room, and Spike decides to deal with Willie rather than Buffy. Spike's making a lot of dumb decisions in this episode.
A lot of people make a lot of dumb decisions in this episode.
But that gives Buffy the opportunity to run and pull the knife from Drusilla and Angel's hand. During all of this, Patrice slices Kendra's shirt. And then Kendra says, "That's me favorite shirt. That's me only shirt." And I wrote in my notes, "Really? What is this crap?" Why does she have one shirt?
Yeah, why?
I don't know if it's just...
Like, what does she wear when she's washing it?
See, I mean, you're making me think thing about the Watcher that I don't want to think anymore.
It's a really weird line.
I don't
Because it's
like
funny in the moment, but if you actually think about it, it's like that makes zero sense.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think a way you can explain it away, even though it's but the way you can explain it away is that it's her only shirt that she has now because she traveled in like the cargo hold of a plane with nothing on her.
I like that. I like that. That's an explanation that I can say makes sense.
But it's still like, it's a line that doesn't need to be there.
No, it really doesn't. So then we have Spike. He kind of goes up to Drusilla and is like, yeah, I hope that's enough. We got to go because we're all kinds of outnumbered. Because it's basically Spike against all of them. So he grabs a torch and sets the place on fire. He grabs Drusilla and they start leaving. And Buffy grabs something. I'm not sure what it is. And
It's an incense. It's an incense burner thing.
Oh, an incense burner.
And she swings it and hits him in the most comical way of taking out anybody ever.
Yeah. It's very cartoon-like.
It's like, well, I didn't realize I changed the channel to Looney Tunes.
Yeah. And then a beam and an organ and stuff fall onto Spike and Drusilla. And Buffy leans down to check on Angel. And we see everyone watching them through the fire, which is some pretty cool imagery. And then they're all like, let's get him out of here. And they all leave, which frustrates me to no end because why didn't they go find Drew and Spike and stake them while they were...
Oh, no, that doesn't bother me at all.
Unconscious or whatever under the organ.
That doesn't bother me at all. That building's on fire. They're out of there.
No, they had time.
No, that building's up. I have problems with the fact that Spike and Drew survived that fire.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, it couldn't have really been on fire that much because Spike and Drusilla
Do you remember
fine.
the last shot?
And vampires, very combustible.
No, the truth is, Spike and Drew should be dead, and they're just magically not because they hid under wet blankets and nobody saw it.
An organ and rubble.
Oh, man.
I'm assuming that the police lady is dead because, she was just like, we didn't see her killed like the vampires and the worm guy.
Mm-hmm.
The police lady was just knocked into a pile of rubble. Too. So I'm guessing she burned to death, even though, humans not as combustible as vampires.
Perhaps.
Yeah. And at some point, Spike called off the bounty he had on Buffy with the Order of Taraka because they stopped coming.
I think that is explained in the next episode. I think Angel says a line about how Spike's presumed dead, and so the contract's been terminated. I think I remember seeing that in one of the continuity threads in one of the wikis that I was reading.
I don't remember that, but it's very, very possible.
It doesn't really help. The Order of Taraka is just dumb.
Yeah.
So then we get to the cutest scene ever.
Oh, yes. It's adorable.
Which, my understanding is
like I said, Willow and anybody.
Yeah. My understanding is this is like 90% ad-lib between Allison and Seth.
Was it really?
Yeah.
That makes it even more awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, hey. Animal cracker?
No, thank you. How's your arm?
Suddenly painless.
You can still play the guitar okay?
Well, not well, but not worse.
I never really thanked you.
Oh, no, please don't. I don't do thanks. I get all red. Have to bail. It's not pretty.
Well, then, forget that thing. Especially with the part where I kind of owe you my life.
Oh, look. Monkey. And he has a little hat and little pants.
Yeah, I see.
The monkey's the only cookie animal that gets to wear clothes. You know that? You have the sweetest smile I've ever seen. So I'm wondering, do the other cookie animals feel sort of ripped? Like, is the hippo going, hey, man, where are my pants? I have my hippo dignity. And the monkey's just, I mock you with my monkey pants. And then there's a big coo in the zoo.
The monkey is French?
All monkeys are French. You didn't know that?
No.
But I think everything after you have the sweetest smile is ad-libbed. So
yeah, well, Oz is so sweet like just like randomly sweet, because she asked him how his arm is, and he's like suddenly painless.
Yeah.
And then just goes on to something else, and then he says that about the sweetest smile, and then he just goes on to something else, and it's just like you're so sweet.
Yeah, he can just he can just drop
especially
those
for a high school
compliments.
guy.
Yeah. I will say, I'll get into this more. Oz is one of those characters I enjoy so much in the moment when I'm watching him. He's not a character I feel like they did enough with. I feel like he didn't have a great story arc overall.
Yeah.
And I feel like we were kind of shortchanged on Oz. And in some ways, I feel like he's... And this is something that might get people hating me. I think he can be a tad overrated at times. Because anytime I see him, I get it. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I understand why people like him. But he's not a very fleshed out character the way that a lot of the other characters are.
Yeah, I love Oz.
But
Sorry.
yeah, just straight up enjoyable. Like, anytime I see him, I'm like, yay, it's Oz. I'm excited to see Oz. But once he's off camera, I cease to think about Oz the way that I think about all the other characters. Like, the other characters just constantly, like I just, like, try to analyze them from all these different angles. Oz is just, like, the cool, chill dude that I enjoy when he's on screen. But once he's off screen, I'm just like, okay, I don't have to, like, overanalyze his character because I understand his character perfectly, and there's not as much nuance or layers or conflicts with him. Mm-hmm. And I get it. I get everybody who's just like, he's my favorite character. I was like, I understand.
Well, he's not my favorite. I love him.
Yeah.
I absolutely love him, and I don't know that there's any scenes that I don't like him in, but he's not a favorite. Mm-hmm. You know, he's just kind of, oh, I love him, but,
yeah.
you know.
And I think that's a similar place that I'm at. But I think when I really think about his character arc and stuff like that, there's just certain things about him that I wish we got to explore more. There's a few standout moments that I can think of and be like, man, if they had done more with that, that would have been cool.
Yeah.
But they just never really got that opportunity. I think he's
supposed to be this, like, mostly perfect, supportive boyfriend type character for Willow.
Yeah.
You know? And he does it.
Yeah.
He pulls it off.
Yeah. And that, while enjoyable to watch, isn't fun to analyze. And I think that's where I have my disconnect with Oz. Because he's just almost too perfect at times. Stupid Oz being all too perfect. I love him, though. So then Xander and Cordy are in the hall. Cordy tries to avoid Xander at first, but Xander pulls her aside and says, we need to talk. And yeah, they start to argue again, and then they kiss again, and more sweeping music. And that's pretty much the Xander and Cordelia relationship summed up. I didn't really have anything to note other than the fact that, yep, that's them. Yeah,
I don't have any notes for that scene either.
And then Buffy and Kendra are outside of the school, walking towards the taxi, and Buffy has apparently explained many times about using a ticket and riding on the plane. It's a little, perhaps, condescending. Yeah.
Well, it seems like for someone who's been raised in complete isolation, and no TV or anything, she knows a lot about the world. Like earlier, she knows what a cheerleader is.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, like, she's never seen this on TV because she's not allowed to watch TV. And I doubt she was allowed to read, like, fiction novels that might explain cheerleaders. So, like, how does she know what a cheerleader is?
Maybe
how does she know how to use a ticket?
One of the other previous Slayers was a cheerleader, and she researched the previous
Buffy.
Slayer.
But she never researched Buffy.
Well, Buffy, the Watchers Council apparently doesn't like Buffy and doesn't like Giles and doesn't tell them anything and doesn't tell anybody else about them.
Apparently.
That's how that works. Figured it out.
There's another little comment in here, and Buffy tells her to watch the movie unless it's about a dog and Chevy Chase. Apparently, there was a movie in the 80s when Sarah Michelle Gellar was a child that she was in with Chevy Chase.
Oh.
And she was not given credit for the movie. Like, she didn't get a credit in it. And so it's supposed to be like a little nod to that.
That's cool. I didn't know that bit of trivia. I like that.
Yeah, it's kind of, I read it in the same place I read the Pink Ranger trivia. So, kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
Then they talk about Angel and how he's cute. Mm-hmm. And Buffy says, well, then maybe they won't fire me for dating him. And Kendra's like, you talk about slaying like it's a job. It's not. It's who you are. And Buffy says, do you get that from the handbook? And Kendra says, from you. Mm-hmm. Which is a wonderful moment, and it's all, yeah, it's part of who she is and everything. But to me, it doesn't seem sincere because, like, Kendra hasn't known her long enough or seen enough of her to know that.
Feels a little unearned.
Yeah.
And I like the sentiment about it.
Exactly. But it doesn't really feel like she should have said it yet.
Well, and I think in general, this episode kind of struggles a little bit with the messaging about Buffy's future. And the back and forth, like you have that moment with her and Willow where she's just like, maybe I can get my chance at my normal life. But then that's never really visited again. And you never really see Buffy have that moment of, no, I'm going to choose to be the Slayer. You just kind of accept that that's the decision she makes, but you don't really have that in the episode of that moment where she's just like, no, this is my decision to do this, not something that I'm forced into doing. Which I feel like was the message that they were going towards, but they just never really did it.
Yeah.
And they end in kind of this weird thing about how it's not a job, it's who you are, which I feel like is a slightly different message than what they were initially going for. So I just think that the two ideas, while both interesting in this idea of Buffy choosing to be the Slayer versus a Slayer is inherently who you are when you are chosen, both work and are both things to be explored within the show and are explored in multiple different scenarios. I feel like they started with one in this episode and then switched to the other, and it didn't really connect the way it should have.
Yeah, definitely. Then, since it's gotten all sappy, Buffy kind of steps in for a hug, and Kendra steps back and is like, I don't hug. Which is kind of a little funny thing to end on.
Yeah.
And then we see
2 piles of ash, because that's what we should see, considering how burnt this building is.
But we should not see that. Or we do not see that. We should, but we don't. I think we should see 2 piles of ash because Buffy and Kendra were smart enough to stake the vampires and actually killed them while they were incapacitated instead of just leaving.
Yeah.
But,
either way, it doesn't work. Either they left because the fire was so bad that it should have burnt them, but it didn't, or the fire wasn't bad and they should have killed them, but they didn't. You know?
Pretty much, yeah. One of those two things.
But
we see Drusilla pick a unconscious Spike up out of the rubble, and she
like
is,
he's nothing. Like he's a feather.
Holding him by one hand off the ground, and you're like, oh, Drusilla. Things are going to get scary.
Drusilla's already scary, and then you add super strength to that, and you're like, nope. She can kill people with her fingernails, Kim. Did you know that? Slayers even.
I do know that, and when she actually does that at the end of this season, and it makes me very, very mad. Because it is very much a plot hole.
So then the episode ends with this iconic wide shot of the burnt church with Drusilla carrying Spike in her arms.
Out of it.
Yeah, it's a great shot, and
there's a lot of good imagery in this episode, and there's a lot of good one-liners, but overall, the way the episode's put together, some of the stuff, when you think about it, just doesn't work.
Yeah, and there's the uncomfortableness surrounding
several things
surrounding Kendra's race and people's treatment of Kendra and the show's treatment of Kendra, and there's just some very unfortunate
underage girls.
Yeah, some very unfortunate things to come out of this era of television and these people creating this show.
Although I feel a little differently about it now that I know, since you've told me, that she originally was not supposed to have a Jamaican background and a Jamaican accent.
Yeah.
You know, if she was just supposed to be, I guess, generic American, does that work? You know, just generic American. A lot of the things that were said, I would never think twice about.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think that the decision to have Buffy kind of imitate her accent was like made during filming that day.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
And which is just a very regrettable one. And is probably the launching off point for just the level of picking this apart. And we've talked about it a little bit. You know, racial diversity is nothing that Buffy the Vampire Slayer has ever been praised for. And it is something that we'll revisit again and again as the series progresses, I'm sure. But I did want to give a shout out to a lot of the fandom for being super cool. And I want to shout out 2 podcasts specifically. The first being Buffering the Vampire Slayer, which took a very active role in the Black Lives Matter movement this year, really kind of reassessed how they were doing everything, brought in some BIPOC voices to help them better shape their podcast, and have created a whole community around awareness and building up all of these diverse voices and using their platform to promote others. And I think what they're doing is really cool. And then I'm also going to shout out Revisiting Sunnydale, which is 2 blurs, as they put it, two black nerds who do an episode by episode discussion of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, similar to what we do. And I listened to their episode on What's My Line, and yeah, they also agree that there's some racist stuff in here. But those are 2 that I want to shout out for sure.
I have not listened to either of those. I don't listen to a whole lot of podcasts, but now I think I'm going to have to go find them both and listen to them.
Yeah. They're both good. They're both really good. Buffering the Vampire Slayer is the big Buffy podcast. They're the.
See, I was going to say I'll check it out, but I was thinking Revisiting Sunnydale sounds like one I would enjoy.
Sunnydale is one that I need to just listen to all of it and really get that perspective, because it is something that is a flaw of Buffy the Vampire Slayer that I am aware of, and hearing those voices I think is important to get me some more perspective there.
Okay, well, I guess that's it.
Yep. Next week is Kim's favorite episode.
I actually think that Ted might be my least favorite in the entirety of the Buffyverse. Not even just Buffy, the entirety of the Buffyverse. And there's some really bad ones in season 4 of Angel. I mean,
yeah. Yeah. Here's what I'll say about Ted. I am excited to discuss Ted.
Really?
I think it's gonna be a fun discussion, because it's fun talking about the terrible episodes. It's fun.
Okay, so this episode was called Ted, and this is what it's about, and we'll see you next week. Yeah.
That's what you were hoping for. It's gonna be a 3-hour podcast watch.
Well, we'll see. I'm sure I'll have plenty to say once I rewatch it and refresh my memory. But I don't know if any of it's going to be nice, because I remember
this part because of this. I don't like this part because of this. All right. Thank you all so much for listening. And this is where we say bye.
Bye.